All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a legal case that honestly has some massive implications for pretty much anyone living in a homeowners association. So, let's get right into it. We're going to explore a real-life battle that all started with this one simple question. And believe me, it ended with a landmark decision that could totally change how your own community operates. So, our story? It all revolves around this one homeowner, a guy named Dennis Legere. And get this, he was actually a former board member himself, so he kind of knew how things were supposed to work. And he started noticing things, decisions being made that just didn't feel right. Stuff happening without any real input from the very people they affected, the homeowners. And look, this wasn't just some small squabble over lawn ornaments. On March 10th, 2014, Mr. Legere took a huge formal step. He filed an official petition, and his claim was pretty serious, that his HOA board was systematically, intentionally violating Arizona's open meeting laws. Basically, he was saying they were running the whole community in secret. His petition really laid it all out there, this clear pattern of behavior. First, he said homeowners were being flat out denied the right to speak before the board voted on things. Then he pointed to the board holding entire, quote, meetings and making big decisions over email. On top of that, key committees like the architectural review were meeting completely in secret. And finally, the board was using these closed-door sessions for regular business, which is a big no-no. To put it simply, he argued that homeowners were being totally shut out of the loop. So what did the HOA have to say about all this? Well, you can probably guess. They denied everything. Their whole argument was that their actions, especially these email votes, weren't just allowed, they were actually necessary for efficiency. They were basically saying, hey, it's just too hard to get things done if we have to hold a formal meeting for every little decision. And this, right here, is the absolute heart of the legal conflict. You've got two laws clashing. On one side, you have the specific HOA law in Arizona, which says, and I'm quoting here, all meetings are open. Pretty clear, right? But the HOA is also a nonprofit, so they pointed to the general nonprofit law, which allows boards to take action without a meeting as long as they get unanimous written consent. That was the loophole. That was the crack in the system they thought they could slip through. And this quote from the board president at the time, James Foxworthy, it just perfectly sums up their whole mindset. He actually testified saying, I would not be willing to serve on the board if a formal meeting was required for every single action. I mean, wow. He's saying that requiring open meetings was just too impractical and that no one would volunteer. It was the classic standoff, wasn't it? Efficiency versus transparency. Okay, so the case goes to court, right? It lands in front of an administrative law judge. And the first decision, which drops on August 19th, 2014, well, it was kind of a mixed bag for Mr. Legere. So, the judge agreed with Mr. Legere on a couple of big things. Yep, the HOA illegally stopped members from speaking before votes. And yep, the architectural committee held secret meetings without notice. But, and this is a huge but, the judge completely dodged the main event. He refused to rule on the email meetings, saying he didn't have the jurisdiction. So, the biggest, most important question was just left hanging. But Dennis Legere was not about to let that slide. He wasn't done. He immediately turned around and filed for a rehearing. His argument was simple. You can't just ignore the single most important question of the whole case. Can an HOA use a general law to get around a specific law? He wasn't going to stop until he got a real, definitive answer. And this timeline, man, it really shows you what a long haul this was for him. We're talking from the first petition in March all the way to a final decision more than a year later. But you know what? His persistence paid off. The rehearing was granted, and that forced the judge to stop dodging and finally face the email voting issue head on. All right, so here we are, April 23rd, 2015. The final, definitive ruling finally comes down. So, which law wins this fight? So, the judge's final decision all hinged on this fundamental legal idea called statutory construction. Sounds complicated, but it's really not. It's just the rulebook judges use when two laws seem to contradict each other. And the number one rule is super simple. A more specific law will always beat a more general one. Okay, so with that rule in mind, the judge looked at the two laws, and the ruling was clear. The HOA open meeting law was written specifically for planned communities like this one. It was custom-made for this exact situation. That means it trumps the much broader, more general law that applies to every nonprofit out there, whether it's a huge charity or a tiny little club. Specific beats general. End of story. And the judge didn't even have to dig deep for evidence. He pointed right to the text of the law itself. It literally says that it's the policy of the state for meetings to be conducted openly. It even tells courts that if there's any confusion, they have to rule in favor of open meetings. The law couldn't be clearer. It's designed from the ground up to favor transparency. The HOA's argument just didn't hold up. They were wrong. And so, as a result of all this, Dennis Legere was officially declared the winner. The HOA got slapped with an order to pay back his $2,000 filing fee, and they had to pay another $2,000 as a civil penalty to the state. It was a total, clear-cut victory for transparency. So you might be thinking, okay, that's a cool story from Scottsdale, Arizona, but what does it mean for me? Why does this one case actually matter to every single homeowner out there? Because this ruling sets a really powerful precedent. Let's break down the big takeaways. First, laws written specifically for HOAs, they almost always win against general rules. Second, you have a right to speak. The law is often on your side to make your voice heard before a vote happens. Third, but it's more efficient is not a legal excuse. A board can't just ignore open meeting laws because it's convenient. And finally, number 4, when things get murky, the law defaults to transparency, not secrecy. The bottom line is this: openness in your HOA isn't just a nice to have, it's the law. And that really leaves us with one final big question, doesn't it? This whole thing happened. This huge precedent was set, all because one homeowner was paying attention. He saw something wrong, and he wasn't afraid to stand up and demand what the law already required. So you have to ask yourself, what's being decided behind the scenes in your community?